Hello, viewers. Welcome to Eyes on the Votes, another episode of MAGA. In this episode, we shall understand America's relationship with Europe and the rest of the world in respect to Donald Trump's MAGA. America is not and will never be a threat to or an enemy of Europe, Russia, Canada, China, Africa, Latin American countries, or the world as a globe. At least, or at most, not when a conservative leader, Republican leadership, is in the White House. Listening to Marco Rubio's speech in this video confirms that Donald Trump's administration wants Europe and other parts of the world to be as peaceful and successful as America.
We believe that Europe must survive because the two great wars of the last century serve for us as history's constant reminder that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours. Because we know that the fate of Europe will never be irrelevant to our own. National security, which this conference is largely about, is not merely a series of technical questions. How much we spend on defense or where, how we deploy it, these are important questions, they are. But they are not the fundamental one. The fundamental question we must answer at the outset is, what exactly are we defending? Because armies do not fight for abstractions. Armies fight for a people. Armies fight for a nation. Armies fight for a way of life. And that is what we are defending. A great civilization that has every reason to be proud of its history, confident of its future, and aims to always be the master of its own economic and political destiny. It was here, in Europe, where the ideas that planted the seeds of liberty that changed the world were born. It was here, in Europe, which gave the world the rule of law, the universities, and the scientific revolution. It was this continent that produced the genius of Mozart and Beethoven, of Dante and Shakespeare, of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And this is the place where the vaulted ceilings of the Sistine Chapel and the towering spires of the great cathedral in Cologne, they testify not just to the greatness of our past or to a faith in God that inspired these marvels. They foreshadow the wonders that await us in our future. But only if we are unapologetic in our heritage and proud of this common inheritance can we together begin the work of envisioning and shaping our economic and our political future. Deindustrialization was not inevitable. It was a conscious policy choice, a decades-long economic undertaking that stripped our nations of their wealth, of their productive capacity, and of their independence. And the loss of our supply chain sovereignty was not a function of a prosperous and healthy system of global trade. It was foolish. It was a foolish but voluntary transformation of our economy that left us dependent on others for our needs and dangerously vulnerable to crisis. Mass migration isn't some fringe concern of little consequence. It was and continues to be a crisis which is transforming and destabilizing societies all across the West. Together, we can reindustrialize our economies and rebuild our capacity to defend our people. But the work of this new alliance should not be focused just on military cooperation and reclaiming the industries of the past. It should also be focused on together advancing our mutual interests in new frontiers, unshackling our ingenuity, our creativity, and the dynamic spirit to build a new Western century. Commercial space travel and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, industrial automation and flex manufacturing, creating a Western supply chain for critical minerals not vulnerable to extortion from other powers, and a unified effort to compete for market share in the economies of the global South. Together, we can not only take back control of our own industries and supply chains, we can prosper in the areas that will define the 21st century. But we must also gain control of our national borders. Controlling who and how many people enter our countries, this is not an expression of xenophobia, it is not hate. It is a fundamental act of national sovereignty. And the failure to do so is not just an abdication of one of our most basic duties owed to our people. It is an urgent threat to the fabric of our societies and the survival of our civilization itself. And finally, we can no longer place the so-called global order above the vital interests of our people and our nations. We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored, and we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world, but we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world. And we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law which they themselves routinely violate. This is the path that President Trump and the United States has embarked upon. It is the path we ask you here in Europe to join us on. It is a path we have walked together before and hope to walk together again. For 5 centuries, before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. Against that backdrop, then as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again now, together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. An alliance is the alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future. And the only fear we have is the fear of the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children. An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. Not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations. An alliance that does not allow its power to be outsourced, constrained, or subordinated to systems beyond its control. One that does not depend on others for the critical necessities of its national life. And one that does not maintain the polite pretense that our way of life is just one among many, and that asks for permission before it acts. And above all, an alliance based on the recognition that we, the West, have inherited together, what we have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable. Because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond. Acting together in this way, we will not just help recover a sane foreign policy. It will restore to us a clear sense of ourselves. It will restore a place in the world. And in so doing, it will rebuke and deter the forces of civilizational erasure that today menace both America and Europe alike. So in a time of headlines heralding the end of the transatlantic era, let it be known and clear to all that this is neither our goal nor our wish. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe.
We saw this evidently with Syrian sanctions lifted, cutting-edge AI technological investment in Saudi Arabia, strikes of terrorist hidden boot camps, and deploy of American army in Nigeria to combat terrorism, Rwandan Congo peace deal, restore of democracy in Venezuela, Indian-Pakistan peace deal, sustainable Gaza peace deal, Armenia and Azerbaijan deal to end Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Also know that a nation is not strong geopolitically and economically by its population and natural resources alone, but by the type of wiseful and resilient leadership it has. Take, for instance, a case study of Singapore and Nigeria. Singapore's population is 6.11 million as of June 2025, and Nigeria's is 237.5 million as at 2025. Singapore's nominal GDP per capita is among the highest in the world, estimated at approximately $87,827 United States dollars to $94,741 United States dollars in 2024 to 2025, far more than that of Nigeria, which has significantly decreased to approximately $824 United States dollars to $835 United States dollars as of early 2026, according to the 2025 International Monetary Fund and Focus Economics data. Singapore's natural resources are nowhere near comparison with that of Nigeria, but its GDP is by average far above that of the self-proclaimed giant of Africa who lavish in poverty. In Singapore, waste lucratively contributes to its GDP, unlike Nigeria, where waste brings disorder and chaos. This is because, in Singapore, they hold their political elites accountable to their responsibilities, unlike the self-proclaimed giant of Africa, where fraud, corruption, and money laundering is the order of the day. Across global geopolitical domains, conservative leaders like President Donald Trump, Prime Minister Orbán Viktor, Chancellor Friedrich Merz, Kemi Badenoch, leader Conservative Party in the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, Marine Le Pen, leader of National Front Party in France, Liz Truss, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, President Javier Milei, Prime Minister Takaichi Sine, and many others come with principles of dignity to make policies that preserve cultural heritage and increase standards of living for its citizens, unlike the weak lefties and liberals like Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, President Emmanuel Macron, Peter Magyar, that gets themselves busy with unproductive ideologies like open border policies that brings in mass organized criminalism, pride parade, abortions, trans, woke, feminisms, DEI, and other destructive ideologies that encourage corruption, frauds, sex, and human traffics, terrorisms, homicides, suicides, and other form of violence. Let's take another instance with the two Secretary of Health of America in the last 5 years. Biden feeble transgender 4-star Admiral Assistant Health Secretary, Rachel Levine, and Donald Trump strong Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the video. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is seen having 20 pull-ups at the age of 60. See the video and judge for yourself. Another example of weak leadership are these feeble dying two leaders that love themselves so much. Former President Joe Biden and 2023 INEC proclaimed President of Nigeria Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Also judge for yourself. At least you now know that a nation is not powerful by its natural resources and population, but by the strong leaders the people choose, so always endeavor to elect the right ones. Remember, no prejudice. Until we come your way again, stay safe. Love from Eyes on the Votes.